How did you go from reading screenplays for free to then getting hired to be a script reader?
Right. Well, that job I was talking to you about, working for that producer, that first thing that cracked me into the system, I was reading them for free. I was an intern in my mid-20s, but it was a foot in the door, right? Then I got the job with Norman Lear, and that's when I was sort of being paid to read scripts. That was one of my main jobs, besides administrative duties of being an assistant to a producer's or a vice president of a production company. That was one of my main remits, was to read scripts. Many years down the road, after working for several production companies and networks and things like that, I switched over to the dark side and became a writer myself. And as a way to pay the bills, I offered my vast knowledge of story theory to be a script reader for, I've worked for various companies like Script Shark. I don't even know if they're still around anymore. I would, go over to their offices, pick up a load of scripts that people wanted covered or get notes on, and I'd read them and have to turn them around in a week or a few days. And, would have to, give them my thoughts on what they can do to make it better,
And just as a side, so you were, as an intern, you'd gone to film school, flown from DC area to LA, and you were doing an unpaid internship.
Yeah.
May I ask, were you doing any moonlighting to pay the bills? Like, how does one do that
right
in an expensive city like LA?
Well, what I was predominantly, the temping was really how I made my money. So it wasn't glamorous at all. I signed up with like 3 or 4 of them. I assume they're still around, but I had to sign up with them and call in every morning and say, do you got anything? And then they'd call me within the next hour. And if I didn't hear anything by 8:30, I wasn't working that day. But I would go everywhere. I would go to sit on desks in Disney, and Sony, and at Paramount, and at MGM. All over the place. I mean, I ended up at virtually every Warner Brothers, virtually every lot. Could be anywhere. Sometimes I was working in a creative area. Sometimes I was working in home video. Sometimes I was working at a lawyer's, in the legal department. Sometimes I was working in the marketing department. Didn't matter. Eventually, I had a friend who worked at Sony, and they had something called the floater pool, which is sort of an in-house coverage of desks and assistants, and she got me on that. So I was technically a Sony employee, but that meant that I was only there and working in Culver City, and I would just, whoever needed me, I would just sit on the desk. Essentially a in-house temp, but it paid reasonably well. And from then because I was there, and also my internship happened to be at across the street, I could just, on my lunch break, go over there, check in, pick up the scripts I had to read, take them home, and it was at that point that I started to get to know the people at the production company better, because I wasn't just, my face was showing up more, I was just sticking my head in a lot more. And I think that's a good lesson to people if they want to break in, is to get yourself out there, mix, mingle, and in any way that you can. Because you never know when that next opportunity or that next, person that you might meet who might open a door for you.
Yeah, sometimes I think temping gets a bad rap. Not that I did too much of it, but there's a freedom in that you're not really a threat to anyone's job because you're just a quote unquote a temp.
Right.
And people actually sometimes treat you better. You get you can be berated by somebody because you're just a temp. But sometimes I think it's actually, there's freedom. You don't have a plaque on your cubicle where someone's like, oh, that's the new guy? Okay.
Right.
So there is a beauty to it. I don't know.
I learned a lot being a temp. You learn, I wasn't really, when I was in DC, I wasn't working in offices necessarily. And I knew that if I was going to be working for producers, above the line producers, not a line producer or something like that, I knew that there was going to be an etiquette that I'd have to learn about answering phones properly and using, dating myself, but in the 90s, computers were still not as robust as they are now, and they weren't as ubiquitous then as they are now. So there were, just how do you use all these interoffice things, and how do you act, and learning names of people. Like when so-and-so calls, I know, oh, that's an important person. I can't flub it, or I have to, get my person that I'm on the desk for right away. And that just takes knowledge. But more for me was, there was also all these resources that were around. Like this, back in the day, there was the Hollywood Creative Directory. I don't know if you remember that or not, but it was a list of all the production companies in the town and who worked at them. It was, I think IMDb bought them at one point, IMDb, or whoever owns IMDb, Amazon bought them too and merged them together. So the IMDb Pro that you see now is what these directories were at the time. And so they had one for managers, they had one for production companies, I think they had one for PR or something like that. But they had all the addresses, and they had all the phone numbers, and they had all the people who worked there. So I could just get them one,
right,
call, and just say, hey, do you guys need any assistants or readers over there? No, we don't. Next one. Do you need anything? Yeah, why don't you send your CV over? Okay. And I got a couple interviews off of just cold calling.
Right, much different world then.
Yeah.
The world of WordPerfect.
I'm old.
It's okay, I remember it too. So, but yeah, no, I think also too, because now we're inundated with so much, being sold information or wrong people getting information.
Right.
It's just a different world. Everything's closed down. So
yes.
I think it was freer then in some sense. But
I still don't see if one wanted to invest in IMDb Pro or Letterboxd or one of these things, and it's kind of like LinkedIn, where you can at least get the sense of who works for whom and how they're connected to one another. And understanding that web of connection and family trees of who worked for what producers and what actors worked and with which directors and so on and so forth. Having that general knowledge is very useful if you ever get into a interview situation or just a conversation with someone who you don't know could potentially help you. But if you seem knowledgeable and you have a general sense of what's going on and how people are related, they're going to, if I were to hire someone, that person looks like they know what's going on in the industry at any given time. There are also information on there about, offices and emails and whatnot. I don't think anyone who works in this business, especially at the producer level, they're all salespeople. And at a certain level, they will admire someone who has the chutzpah to reach out in such a way. If someone did that to me, I would think, well, they at least want it. They're at least eager. And I don't see why I don't see why trying would be so terrible.
Sure, and you will try, just from speaking from experience, and you also get your head handed to you by certain people who are like, who are you and why would you ever think you could contact me? So you'll learn that lesson too. But most of the people probably won't do that.
Right.
But also following protocol of not sending something unsolicited.
Yes.
But yeah, there will be those times where you will get knocked down and have to get back up and brush yourself off because somebody's just completely berated you. How did you get this number?
Yeah.
Who are you? Don't ever call here again.
You will get your share of that, like when you're in sales, like it's a numbers game. You're just trying to get that one. But but you're right, you can't just send your screenplays to these places willy-nilly. You'll go right to the delete file. Usually they'll need it to come through some sort of representation, whether it's a lawyer or a rate agent or a manager. Unless you get a chance to meet a producer or someone who works for them or an executive in a studio or someone who works for them, and you figure out a way to get them to say yes, whether it's at a pitch fest, if they have those anymore, or if you happen to win a screenplay competition and you talk to them, you say that. Yeah, you have to be careful.